Everybody, welcome to another episode of DeLorean Tech, and today we're going to replace the starter in this DeLorean. So that starter is giving us some problems, so we purchased a rebuilt Duralast starter from Autozone, and we're going to go ahead and replace it. So this is what we're using for the replacement starter. It's a remanufactured Duralast starter that I picked up from Autozone. Here's the part number that you need to use when you order this. It's about a total of about $150 shipped. There is a core charge of $40, so the $150 includes the core charge. It's a starter for an Eagle Premier. So here it is right here. Part number 16894. So this does come with a set of troubleshooting instructions. This is just so that you can rule out problems with the battery, which I've already ruled out. So my starter's been giving me problems for probably a year now, and it's becoming more and more frequent. Okay, I'm going to start it up. Hear that? So the first thing you want to do is go ahead and disconnect all of the wiring that's here. If you have a boot, remove the boot, and you'll have to disconnect the battery cables that are in there. So you're also going to want to remove the oil filter so you can gain access into this area here in order to remove the old starter and install a new one. So this will have to come out. So we're going to take the oil filter off and drain a little bit of the oil and see how much comes out. You don't actually have to drain the oil pan itself, just take out the oil filter. So the post that you connect the battery to is a 13 millimeter. So just get a 13 millimeter socket and remove the nut that's securing the terminals on. So here's what it looks like with the battery cable lugs disconnected. This is a bullet connector. You're gonna have to create another wire. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new wire that connects to the new starter, and to be able to plug that into this connector here. We'll try to clean that out with some electronic contact cleaner if you can. So this is the wire that we created. You're going to need to connect this to the solenoid. So it's really a bullet connector on one end and then a small ring terminal on the other with some heat shrink. So this wire is going to need to connect to this connector right here. So you need to make sure that you use a ring terminal that's going to fit. So the two white wires that connect to the original stock solenoid are also going to be connected to this post right here. So in order to get the starter out, there's three mounting bolts that have to be removed. You've got one right here, you've got one right there, and then you have one on the very, very top right there. So it's probably not a bad idea to use some knocker loose in order to loosen the mounting bolts for the starter motor. So there's a lot of built up stuff in here. It's probably not a bad idea to like spray a little bit on there in order to make sure those are easy to loosen up. So these bolts that hold in the starter take 13 millimeter socket. So that nut right there takes a 10 millimeter socket to take that off. So once you get that loosened, you might be able to get the rest of it by hand. So now you have all of the wiring disconnected. Now you can go ahead and start removing the starter. So now it's time to take the oil filter off. So it might make sense to zip tie and tuck the wiring out of the way here so you have a clear path to work. So I have temporarily zip tied some of the cables and the wiring out of the way before we remove the oil filter. So you're going to want to put a pan just below it to catch any oil that may spill out. But hopefully there should not be too much oil coming out.
Put it right just like that. Perfect.
So now you have the oil filter disconnected. So we're going to clean up the area and start removing the original starter. So now you have the oil filter off. Now it's time to start removing these bolts that are holding the starter to the transmission casing. Okay, so we've got all 3 bolts out, and now we're going to remove the original starter. So that is the flywheel right there. You're just going to make sure to replace that plate. So it's probably a good idea to take some engine degreaser to this plate right here and clean it up. Okay, so here are the 2 units side by side. So here's the original factory unit, and here's the reconditioned or refurbished unit that we got, the rebuilt one. This one's a lot heavier. So mine had a little bit of rust, so I cleaned it off, sanded it off, and I spray painted it a little bit. So we'll just let that dry, and then we'll put it on when we install the starter, the new starter.
Tim, we're still getting.
So now is a good opportunity to clean out this cavity here where the starter fits in. So I got a little bit of degreaser on this rag right here. I'm just gonna start cleaning this out, try to get as much debris and dirt out as I can. Okay, so once you're done reconditioning that plate, just go ahead and replace that before putting the starter in. Don't forget to replace that plate. Now it's time to put the new starter in, so we'll just go ahead and slide it through the front here, just go inside. So as you can see, the starter is quite a bit smaller than the factory version, but the bolt holes align with the original factory bolt holes, so it's completely compatible. So you can see from the back, we're going to go ahead and align these holes together. Make sure that plate doesn't come out of alignment though. So what I recommend doing is, if you're putting this in by yourself, you can take one hand, put it on this side to sort of turn the starter while you're aligning it with the bolt holes right here. So it's not a bad idea to clean that ring terminal right there. I just used a little bit of some sandpaper and got all of the black grime off of it. So that way you got a good connection to the new starter solenoid.
Yeah.
So you gotta make sure that the starter engages the flywheel properly.
Yours all done?
Okay. So once you get the starter mated up to the transmission casing, go ahead and start bolting it on. So once you have all the bolts in place, you can go ahead and tighten those up to factory torque specifications, and then we'll go ahead and connect the electrical wiring to it. So the white and red wires here and the new wire that we connected, this blue and yellow wire, we're gonna go ahead and connect those to this small post right here. So that one right there. Let's go ahead and follow up with a socket to tighten that up. That's it. Next we'll connect the battery and alternator cable. So there's a spring washer and a nut on that top post. That's where you're going to connect your battery and your alternator cable to. So you'll remove those first, and just go ahead and put your battery and alternator cables. It doesn't matter which one you put on first, although sometimes for fitment it does kind of pay to test out which will work the best. So just to protect the connectors right here, these posts, I went ahead and applied some heat shrink over those. That'll add a little bit of extra protection to the connections. So after you finish everything, just go ahead and make sure that these 3 bolts back here are tightened up. And we have all the connections complete. Last but certainly not least, you're gonna wanna put your oil filter back in. So once you have the oil filter installed, you are ready to give it a test start. So first thing you want to do, obviously, reconnect your battery. Make sure that you don't have a short or anything. So if you don't hear your starter, that means you're good. All right, so we're gonna do a test start. See if we got everything going. All right, so here we go. First time starting it. So it might sound a little bit different. It has a little bit of almost like a little higher pitch sound to it. We're gonna turn it off and then start it back up again real quick. All right, start number 2. Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds really good. Okay, so this is the second day with the new starter. I'm gonna go ahead and do another test start. Starts up really nice. One of the things I noticed too is after I replaced the starter, I noticed my voltage has gone up slightly. So I'm getting a solid 14, actually 14.2, 14.3 right here at my USB port with my digital voltmeter. And I also noticed that at the instrument cluster, I'm also getting a much higher reading as well than I normally do. So I think that what was going on was the starter connections were probably very dirty, and as a result of cleaning the connections and obviously replacing the starter, that contributed to the increase in voltage. It was kind of substantial. The last time I checked it before I replaced the starter, I was getting about 13.7. All right, everybody. If you have any questions, go ahead and drop those down in the comments. And once again, thanks for watching.